Hi, just a quick broadcast for today. I'm Davina. This is Polity with DavCat43, and I wanted to talk about the case of Amari Marsh, who is a woman in South Carolina who had a miscarriage, and South Carolina prosecutors jailed her without bond, charged her with murder and homicide by child abuse, and threatened her with life imprisonment. So the criminalization of pregnancy loss in red states since Dobbs. It's an important topic to talk about because Donald Trump is a candidate running for election. It's a close election at this moment, looking at some polls, and people need to step up. People need to get interested in the outcomes that can happen to women and to families, because you can have children, they don't care. You just have to be someone who either needs medical attention or is experiencing pregnancy loss. You're now a murder suspect in red states where the overturning of Roe v. Wade has given rise to the Dobbs decision that allows fanatic extremist prosecutors in Republican-governed red states that will persecute you, that will charge you as homicide by child abuse for losing your pregnancy. And pregnancy loss is very common, and the circumstances are very difficult to tell the difference between spontaneous miscarriages and induced miscarriages. And they can accuse you of homicide via carelessness if they don't like the look of your face or your skin color, and they want to charge you with negligent homicide because they think you drank too much coffee. And then it's child abuse because you haven't you've lost your pregnancy, and they can build their reputation as an effective prosecutor by bringing charges against you for losing your pregnancy in a way that they deem to be suspicious. And who wants to get pregnant? It's very discouraging from getting pregnant, from engaging in the idea of having children, if the police could criminally charge you with murder and hold you without bond just because you've hemorrhaged out your wanted unborn child. So yes, some people call it insanity. She tells her story. I wonder if there's a video that we can quickly watch. I'm sharing my screen now with a CNN article, I think, that I've linked. Nope. Oh, it just shared an image. Okay, that's not very useful. Okay, let's open this whole story in a new tab. I'm just going to ask my son, darling, could you go get your sister from the bus stop, please? When? Now. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. What a good boy. Yeah, I usually walked him. Hello? Yes. Sorry, I can't talk right now, but I can talk again soon. Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. Okay. Thank you. Bye. All right. Sorry about that. I don't want to be disrespectful to Amari's story either. So we're going to try again to bring up her story on the screen. It's very important. All right. So here's Amari. She's telling her story, and I'm grateful because it takes a lot to put your head above the parapet and become a target for MAGA, whose gullibility and refusal to accept that Donald Trump is a self-serving career criminal liar makes them willing to believe the worst of so many people, even when the circumstances are clear. So Amari Marsh had just finished her junior year at South Carolina State University in May 2023 when she received a text message from a law enforcement officer. Sorry it has taken this long for paperwork to come back, the officer wrote, but I finally have the final report and wanted to see if you and your boyfriend, see if you and your boyfriend could meet me Wednesday afternoon for a follow-up. Marsh understood that the report was related to a pregnancy loss she'd experienced that March, she said. During her second trimester, Marsh said she unexpectedly gave birth in the middle of the night. Well, gave birth she miscarried. Giving birth is typically a term of reference used to giving birth to a full term, or at least a close to term child, not a second trimester unborn child. All right. She unexpectedly miscarried in the middle of the night whilst on a toilet in her off-campus apartment. She remembered screaming and panicking and said the bathroom was covered in blood. I couldn't breathe, said Marsh, now 23. The next day, when Marsh woke up in the hospital, she said a law enforcement officer asked her questions. Then, a few weeks later, she said she received a call saying she could collect her daughter's ashes. At that point, she said she didn't know she was being criminally investigated. Yet 3 months after her loss, Marsh was charged with murder, homicide by child abuse, law enforcement records show. She spent 22 days, 22 days, a college student, at the Orangeburg Calhoun Regional Detention Center, where she was initially held without bond, facing 20 years to life in prison. This month, 13 months after she was released from jail to house arrest with an ankle monitor, Marsh was cleared by a grand jury. Her case will not proceed to trial. Amari's father, Herman Marsh, seen here with his wife Regina, thought his daughter's situation was a bad joke until reality set in. I told my wife, I said, we need to get an attorney now. Her story raises questions about the state of reproductive rights in this country, disparities in healthcare, and pregnancy criminalization, particularly for Black women like Marsh. More than 2 years after the Supreme Court issued its Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization decision, which allowed states to outlaw abortion, the climate around these topics remains highly charged. Not just the climate, these are actual circumstances for people's lives. She was put on house arrest with an ankle monitor after spending time in jail 3 months after losing her unborn baby. And I can call it a fetus. I'm happy to call it a fetus. I don't want an unborn child to have the same legal protections as a born child, because if an unborn child, a fetus, is housed in my body and my life can be put at risk through its presence remaining there, then I want to be free to choose my own life. And I want other people to be free to make their own choices, and they can choose to sacrifice their own life or gamble with their life or just put their life in a moderate amount of risk, and they can make that choice. Maybe I would accept a mild amount of risk to my life if I was pregnant. If I had a cancer diagnosis and I could either have an abortion and then receive chemotherapy and radiotherapy treatment to get rid of the cancerous cells, then I would likely choose that option. But there are factors that would influence my decision. How far along was I? Was I prepared to gamble with my life if I already had children? I mean, I do right now. I have 2 children. So if I was thinking, no, I really don't want to gamble with my life, I want to be here for my present 2 children, then those would be factors in my decision. But it ought to be mine. My husband shouldn't be left to be a widower looking after 2 children because I'm compelled and coerced by state legislation to retain a pregnancy and therefore be non-eligible to receive cancer treatment. And if I have any one of the myriad of pregnancy conditions that require medical stabilizing care, I would like that to be available to me without the doctor's judgment being compromised by the possibility of a jail sentence or a loss of license if they gave me the procedures needed to remove any remaining fetal tissue following an incomplete miscarriage, or if there was a placental abruption, or if my child was if my pregnancy was proceeding but my future child had no prospect of life, if they were acranial, if they're without a portion of their skull and wouldn't survive more than a few hours or days, if they had significant loss of organs, for example, no kidneys or no stomach, I would want the choice to be able to say no to putting my body through the rest of a pregnancy. And again, letting another woman make her own choices on that subject and go, nope, if she's happy to continue with the pregnancy so that she can hold a full-term baby without a cranium or without certain organs, and she wants to hold a full-term baby in her arms after birthing it and put her body through that strain, and she feels she has the resources to do so, and is supported to do so, then she should feel free to make that decision. But it shouldn't be coerced. And I'm saying that in a moral context to say it is immoral to vote for Republicans given the circumstances that they force women to go through against their will. So Marsha's case, where are we up to? Marsha's case also highlights what's at stake in November. 61% of voters want Congress to pass a federal law restoring a nationwide right to abortion, according to a recent poll by KFF, the Health Policy Research Polling and News Organization that includes KFF Health News. Or it's 61% of voters. It's a majority. Sometimes you hear that there's a larger majority that supports reproductive rights and women's rights to choose for themselves whether or not to continue with the pregnancy, that women are not mere state-ordered vehicles for bringing new life into the world. It's true that societies benefit when women feel supported enough to willingly engage into pregnancy and procreation. But it tends to be the fear of letting women make their own choices tends to be accompanied by fear of migrants. It's often people who, whether consciously or not, want to build up the base of the demographic pyramid, i.e. have a number of younger people in the workforce who can support whose earnings will help pay into retirement fund payouts and social safety net benefits for older people and the no longer working part of the population, through having this strong, younger, larger base of a pyramid and a smaller pyramid of elderly people. And they fear migrants coming in to contribute to that demographic base of younger working people. And they fear that migrants don't contribute to the United States, which is gullible in a very xenophobic but also a very destructive way. That kind of gullibility makes people willing to believe a con artist, grifter, criminal careerist, adjudicated rapist, convicted fraudster such as Donald Trump. I mean, that so many Americans could even consider voting for Donald Trump, who literally incited an attempted overthrow of American democracy, not just the government, but the system of American democracy. Because once you've installed yourself as an unelected despot, you have no incentive to roll with democratic elections going forwards. You can roll with the appearance of democratic elections, but if Donald Trump had managed to win a second term in office through the means of his supporters disrupting the January 6th certification of Biden's win, and then it had all gone according to his plans of using the 12th Amendment of the Constitution provision that one delegate from each state in the House of Representatives gets to choose the president if the results are so contentious that nobody's reached 270 electoral college votes. Then they would have used that to put a legalistic veneer over their attempted coup. And if it had been successful, there wouldn't have been any more real elections in the United States as long as Trump or a complicit member of his dynasty were alive. Does that make sense? There would have been no more democracy in the United States. There would have been a managed democracy like you have in Russia, where they have the pretense of elections, but Putin gets to control the media. So you only hear good things about him and the wonderful things he's doing for Russia in terms of getting all their young men killed in an unnecessary war of aggression against their neighbor, Ukraine, where civilians are continually getting bombed and having drones come in to murder them in their cities and as they go about their daily lives, just in an effort to boost Putin's reputation as a conquering hero. And some Russians oppose that, but a lot of Russians support it because it's become a propaganda selling point that it improves Russia's image and it improves Russia's standing if they're successful in their conquest of the neighboring Ukraine and their neighbors, the Ukrainians, who they have deemed to be lesser people who need to be conquered by a superior nationality. And that's that type of hierarchical, deluded superiority thinking is not that distant from all the people who support Russia in the Republican Party, who pay no attention to the fact that Putin literally has people murdered all around the world, that he sends off agents with nerve agents, and I'm going to say nerve agents as well. So Putin sends off Kremlin officials equipped with nerve agents like Novichok to poison people who speak out against Putin. So obviously he can't kill all of his enemies. There's a lot of people around the world prepared to denounce Putin's aggression and immorality, but too many people who probably pride themselves on their own personal decency in the Republican Party support Putin and intend to vote for Putin's little pal, little buddy, his friend Donald Trump, who has openly expressed his admiration for Putin, said that he thinks it's very smart what Putin did to invade Ukraine and the timing of it and how he went about it. Very smart. Donald Trump applauds immoral behavior. He applauds immoral, aggressive behavior, and he whets the appetite of his followers for violence by using such overheated, inflamed, deceitful statements about Democrats and about minority groups that he encourages his followers to have an appetite to, if not do violence themselves, to see violence done. And it has echoes of history where Hitler was able to whip up a significant part of the German public into a frenzy of rage and aggression against Jewish people and communists. I mean, communists, I don't love communists, but at least you can oppose them politically. You don't have to put them in camps and have them starve to death or killed or put in conditions that encourage the spread of typhus and other diseases just because you're against gay people, Jews, gypsies, Romani people, or just an opponent of Hitler, because all of those categories of people suffered in the camps. And Donald Trump now, without a shred of irony, is talking to historically illiterate people and saying, yes, let's have mass deportation. It's going to be great. Yes, I'll put people in camps. Yes, between 11 million and 25 million people, I will boot them out of the country, and in the interim, they'll go in camps. We'll have a mass roundup. I'll get the military and local police and the National Guard involved. And his followers are holding up signs saying mass deportations now at the RNC, the Republican National Convention. And if you didn't see that and experience a chill, then I would suggest that perhaps be less historically illiterate, perhaps see what happens when supporters are unified around a central idea of we're better than those people, and those people are, via their very existence, a threat and should be tormented, expelled, tortured. We don't even care. They're subhuman and they should be put in camps. And I speak on this topic with some passion because when my grandmother was 16, and she was a Polish Jewish person, and so were her family members. And she was pushed to go on a train with her parents to go to a camp. And her parents found a hole in the train carriage and told her she had to leave. She had to escape. And she didn't want to go without her parents. She was 16 years old, and they insisted to her that she, according to her telling, that she jump through the hole in the carriage and that she leave the train and try and make her way back to her sister, who was very blonde and blue-eyed and would pretend she was a member of their family. Oh, hello. So yes, my grandmother did manage to make her way back for her sister and found that her sister had already been given up to the authorities and had already been killed. But she survived, and she was able to meet my grandfather. They lived for a number of years still in Poland. My grandfather was Polish, but he was still from a part of Poland that's now Ukraine. So part of a very wibbly-wobbly part of that particular border between Poland and Ukraine. So he was from Lvov, which is now known as Lviv, and is Ukrainian and has been bombed by Russians. So we're having a bit of full circuitry here in that Russian aggression in World War II, because if everybody remembers, Stalin did sign a pact of non-aggression with Hitler, and they were going to enjoy the spoils of Europe together as the totalitarian leaders of their respective countries in an alliance. And Stalin eventually thought better of it, but initially, at least, Russia and Germany were together and had that pact of non-aggression to illustrate that they were allies. Because the intemperate ambitions of immoral men has throughout history, and I will say and immoral women, because it's less frequent, but sometimes these men are supported by women. It's not like I applaud Eva Braun. I say, hey, how about not being the girlfriend of a pretend patriot who just actually attracts devastation to his country, as well as to the people of his country, as well as to the people of surrounding countries, and indeed from all over the world. Because Australians fought in World War II, Americans fought in World War II. There is a cost to letting the gullibility of racists flourish. People who are prepared to listen to conmen who offer them easy answers that involve vilifying and disparaging minority groups, whether they be Jews, whether they be people from Mexico, whether they be legal migrants from Haiti on a temporary protection visas, or long-term residents from Haiti who have become citizens of the United States or have green cards or any number of things. Because even the Republican governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine has said that the Haitian migrants to Springfield, Ohio, have built that town that was in a downward spiral of contracting economic activity. And the influx of migrants over time, because this movement of people definitely began when Trump was in office as well, that they have helped reduce labor bottlenecks, that they have contributed to the maintenance of industries that needed people willing to do sometimes less popular manual labor jobs, and that they've shown up for work, and that they've on time, and that they've worked hard, and that they are solid contributors to their community. And every day I'm going to be here saying nice things about migrants to try and counter the hateful rhetoric that emanates from the mouth of Donald Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance, because they are, there's something wrong with them, that they would use that type of road to power, that they would use that ability to incite hate and aggression and violence. And there have been over 30 bomb threats against the people of Ohio. There have been schools evacuated, town hall buildings evacuated, people afraid to send their children to school in Springfield, Ohio, not because of migrants, but because of the anti-migrant rhetoric of the Republicans running for office at present. And I say Republicans because if we don't mention that they're Republicans, without that specificity, we can't have accountability. We just have people who go, oh yeah, I have this general idea that politics are terrible, so I won't vote and I won't pay attention to politics. And individuals need to pay attention, because in a democracy where fascists are seeking to seize the reins of power again, because Trump didn't succeed with his insurrection efforts of 2021, because it was January the 6th that particular plot was supposed to come to fruition. And Mike Pence was supposed to do his master's bidding and say, I can't certify this election. So we have to consult our Constitution. I remember it's on page 66 now, because I've done this before. Took me a little while to realize it's more efficient if you memorize your page number. But Amendment 12. Hey, I disappeared. It's because the background's a green screen, but I'm surprised that it blanks out my face. Anyway, my house is not as tidy or pretty or grand piano-y as the scene in the background. But if the person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be the president, if such a number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed. And if no person have such majority, this is what Trump was trying to make happen. He tried to make fetch happen, except fetch was trying to throw into contention Joe Biden's clear election win. Not only did he get over 7 million more votes in the popular vote count than Donald Trump, but where it counts the Electoral College system, he had he had over 300 Electoral College votes, and Donald Trump had less. Joe Biden won. There was a fairly thin margin of victory, but in a number of different states. So even with Donald Trump calling Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and saying, I just need 11,780 more votes, even with him badgering that man for an hour with multiple people on the phone, such as Cleta Mitchell, former Democrat, but current insurrectionist buddy slash lawyer slash campaigner for undermining people's confidence in elections and therefore weakening their attachment to laws that protect voting interests of the American people, which is how you harness the wisdom of crowds, which is how you harness people's interests in looking out for not only themselves, but their families, their communities, and their nation. It's very important, federal elections, and Republicans have been trying to wind back voter protections. They've been trying to engage in voter suppression by leaving Kamala Harris's name off the ballot for overseas digital voting forms that have been sent out to voters overseas who are American citizens and therefore eligible to vote. They have tried to enforce that all ballots be counted by hand, all paper ballots be issued and counted by hand in Georgia in order to gum up the works there. And it shouldn't be a surprise to people, but how are so few people paying attention that this election is evenly matched at present? It's so heartbreaking to see the amount of white pandering that is done to overlook the criminal behavior and lying, deceitful, Hitler-style race-baiting behavior of Trump and J.D. Vance. Because not only do they effectively villainize women by making all women who miscarry suspects in Republican-led states, suspects of the crime of murder or homicide via child abuse. Now we know that we have a specific case, Amari Marsh. We also know Brittany, and I'll look up her name because there was a young lady who also miscarried in her toilet and she was charged with abuse of a corpse. Mm-hmm. Here we go. Brittany Watts, an Ohio woman who suffered a miscarriage at home, was charged with felony abuse of a corpse. She was 32 and she miscarried at 22 weeks while using the bathroom at her home. It's not a coincidence that we have Black women who have been targeted by law enforcement in that way. But there's also many white women who have spoken up to be clear about how their lives and their fertility and their health has been gambled with, has been put at risk by doctors having their medical judgment compromised by legislation that threatens their livelihoods and their freedom by threatening 10-year jail sentences or even longer in states such as it was Georgia and Texas that I know of, but there are 14 states that have made abortion illegal after 6 weeks. And considering pregnancies are counted not just from the day of conception, they're counted from the time of your last period. So being pregnant for 6 weeks doesn't actually mean 6 weeks post-conception. And there are many times where women are just not aware yet that they're pregnant. But now in Republican-led states, they're constrained from making choices about whether they voluntarily want to bring a child into this world. Hiccup. I will stop the screen for Mari's story and I'm going to bring up Brittany Watts. Okay. Share screen. I've probably got too many screens open, but that's okay. Hopefully the internet's still working enough. So she was eventually, the charges were dropped, but Imagine the turmoil of losing your pregnancy and then being charged because you miscarried, an event that is literally common for women. This article contains details that may be disturbing for some reasons, for some readers. Sorry. So here's Brittany Watts, 33, miscarried at home and was charged with a felony. Felony abuse. The fetus was going to be non-viable. A forensic pathologist testified, and it was going to be non-viable because she had premature rupture of membranes. Her water had broken early. Premature rupture of membrane, sometimes abbreviated as PROM, is when the amniotic sac breaks before 37 weeks of pregnancy, the Cleveland Clinic says. The fetus can survive if your water breaks too soon. It depends on factors like the age of the pregnancy and how much amniotic fluid is left. But in Brittany Watts' case, 22 weeks, that was too early. As Stearns testified, the fetus was too young to be delivered. Oh my gosh, look at her hand on her face and look at the distress, and imagine being put through the legal system because your body has failed to be able to bring a fetus to term, and you already feel like you failed. You were pregnant, you're hoping things will go well, because people definitely don't hear enough about how common miscarriages are. They don't want women's grief to be naked and in the open and upsetting people. Maybe it's considered a downer, I don't know, but women are encouraged not to tell people that they even are pregnant before 12 weeks because of the high likelihood of miscarriages early in the pregnancy. So you don't tell people till you past that earlier, relatively more dangerous period for a fetus, and then can say with more confidence, yes, I'm pregnant. But even then, the grief of people who have pregnancies and who miscarry at any stage of a wanted pregnancy and are left still looking pregnant if their belly has already swollen, and have people go, oh, you're pregnant, congratulations. Imagine dealing with that grief of not being pregnant anymore and having to continually tell people that news. And that is probably why you should never ask a woman if she's pregnant. You just let her tell you. What if she just gave birth and her stomach is still distended? Because it is. Your uterus is swollen. There's some time after giving birth that makes your abdominal region still swollen. So I'm going to plug in a plug here. All right. Brittany Watts. We should be talking about her more. Records show that Watts had visited the hospital 3 times in 4 days prior to the miscarriage with vaginal bleeding. After the miscarriage, she returned to the hospital, where a nurse was advised by risk management to contact the police, according to records obtained by the Washington Post. So risk management, does that mean the legal department? It probably does. The legal department of a hospital that are there to manage the risks of being sued for not reporting a crime. So she said to the police, I had a mother who had a delivery at home and came in without the baby, and she says the baby's in her backyard in a bucket, the nurse said, according to the report. I am grieving the loss of my baby, Watts told the Washington Post. I feel anger, frustration, and at times shameful. The Ohio law that Watts is charged under states, no person, except as authorized by law, shall treat a human corpse in a way that the person knows would outrage reasonable family sensibilities or outrage reasonable community sensibilities. My sensibilities are outraged that she was treated this way, that she was charged with a crime for miscarrying. Ms. Watts suffered a tragic and dangerous miscarriage that jeopardized her own life. Rather than focusing on healing physically and emotionally, she was arrested and charged with a felony, her attorney told CNN in an email. And her case was at that time pending before a Trumbull County grand jury. So, yes, the jury dropped the charges, but imagine the cost to her when she should have been healing from a traumatic event of emotionally of losing her baby, and physically of hemorrhaging for multiple days and being turned away from an emergency department when she was vaginally bleeding. All right. Let's go back to Twitter. The news was a little annoying. I know I should do better than to get caught up in what polls say. But there were some polls released today of various battleground states. And battleground states are only important because of the vestigial archaic racism of the elements of the Constitution that were written as a conciliatory gesture to powerful land-owning people whose wealth was dependent on the continuation and even extension of the system of slavery. And those people wanted to know that they wouldn't be disempowered by the abolitionist voters. They wanted to know that they would still be able to have power that could counteract the influence of abolitionists. They didn't want abolitionists to succeed in reducing the profit of their land holdings and the agricultural practices they had that involved not paying their workers and indeed disempowering and persecuting their workers via the system of chattel slavery, which was not only failing to pay people for their labor, but literally owning them and then owning any children that they had. So perpetuating a system of ownership that reduced people to a lower than human legal status. And that is worse than what Republicans are doing now, but Republicans are still reducing women's legal standing to lower than that of average humans. So if men's legal standing and their rights to access needed medical care is the standard for a human, then women are now relegated to less than human because we can carry life. So we are being punished for this magical ability that we have, thanks to biology, of being the carriers of our progeny, of future humans. And the punishment for that is to be rendered unsafe, for our lives and existence to be gambled with, for our husbands to be widowed, our partners to be left to care for our pre-existing children and family members that we have, for our lives to either be lost or to lose our health as a result of undertreated hemorrhaging situations, because doctors cannot make their best practice decisions. They cannot deliver a standard of care. They cannot treat us as if we are humans with full legal protections. We are less than average humans now in states that are governed by Republican written legislation. And that is potentially the future for all of us, should enough voters stay home and fail to vote for Kamala Harris and allow Donald Trump to eke out an electoral college win. If people are going to be stupid enough to vote or allow a con artist to succeed, he is happy to trade away women's rights in order to transactionally derive personal advantage, that is to say power, from pandering to short-sighted evangelical fundamentalist Christians who believe that women shouldn't receive legal treatment if their health is in jeopardy, because you should sacrifice a woman's health and a woman's autonomy in order to preserve decisions that they believe God made. God made the decision for you to conceive a child, and therefore God's will must be upheld, and women should be punished for having the audacity to engage in sexual activity with a partner, and specifically with a man, because if they're engaging with sexual activity with a female partner, no conception results from those activities. But with a man, and men are often reputationally and I think literally people who are interested in engaging in sexual activity. Can you imagine the number of women in domestic violence partnerships who are coerced into engaging in sexual activity, or whose lives are so chaotic that it makes it even more likely that their contraceptive measures will fail and that they have unintended children? And can you imagine living with an abusive partner whose brain is even more broken and antisocial and violent as a consequence of knowing that another life is to be brought into the world? Do you know that the homicide rate goes up for pregnant women in domestic violence, in partnerships that have an element of domestic violence? So if the state is to be allowed to coerce women to remain pregnant against their wishes, then the state is compelling women to increase their own vulnerability to being murdered and abused and put in the hospital and potentially lose their vision, or, just to be beaten, to a point where their future health is sabotaged, to say nothing of the psychological damage that results from being a repeat and continuing victim of abuse. It's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot. I would also like to talk about Trump being bad for the economy, because he is, and people forget. And it's incumbent upon me as a person who's aware of this, and a white person, to speak to my paper-faced peers and say, look, this is from 2019. This is when Trump's idiotic tariff policies put the manufacturing sector in recession, with signs that it was having a contagious effect on adjacent industries in transportation and storage. So yes, initially the increase in economic activity that was on a trajectory, an upwards trajectory, during Obama's second term. So an upwards economy continued for a while whilst Trump was in office. And then after a couple of years, 2019, so he's been in office 2017, 18, by late 2019, it's definitely in recession. And I'll quote from the article. But today, manufacturing has plunged into recession and is threatening to pull down other sectors, perhaps hitting hardest on supporters in those states that helped put Trump in office. Impeachment may be dominating the news, because this was in October 2019 when Trump was being impeached for trying to hold the country of Ukraine hostage to Donald Trump's wishes to generate a hit piece on his most likely rival for the 2020 election, who was Joe Biden. And Joe Biden had not won the primary election for Democratic candidates. Trump just knew that as a former vice president, he had a profile to rival his own profile as an incumbent president and a former reality TV show host, who, with the pretense of being a billionaire and the pretense of being successful, and all of his 6 bankruptcies swept under the rug. The persuasive power of television was harnessed to sell Trump to the public and to cover up his criminal behavior, his fines for violating money laundering legislation, anti-money laundering legislation. All right, to continue to read. As measured by the Federal Reserve, manufacturing output shrank over 2 straight quarters this year. That's the common definition of recession. A separate, widely followed index drawn from purchasing managers showed September's contraction in manufacturing was the steepest since June 2009, with production inventories and new orders all falling. After adding nearly 500,000 jobs in the prior 2 years, which Trump frequently stressed in hard hat rallies throughout the Midwest, manufacturing employment has stalled. Instead of healthy job growth, oh my goodness, I'm lisping so much. Instead of job growth, layoff announcements have surged this year, especially in battleground states such as Pennsylvania and Michigan. Friday's jobs report for September showed a slight drop in total factory jobs. Manufacturing today accounts for only about 10% of economic activity, and so far the overall economy and employment in the US are still growing. But the pace has slowed considerably this year. The faltering industrial sector has started to crimp businesses in the transportation and warehousing sectors, and there are growing worries of spillover effects in the larger services sector and broader economy. Even if the nation can avoid a recession next year, a manufacturing downturn could prove to be politically damaging for Trump, who rode to the White House on enthusiastic support from blue-collar workers in key states and on his promise to revive America's coal, steel, and other industries. So do we see how important that is, that Trump wanted to avoid the political damage of people realizing that there was a manufacturing recession in play that was about to have spillover effects to other industries that would soon be reported on, and that were particularly impactful in the very states that had delivered him his narrow electoral college victory in 2016. So the margin of people in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan who supported Donald Trump, who turned their backs on perhaps their history of voting for Democratic candidates, they went, Trump's going to revive coal and steel and what was the other one? Coal and steel and other industries. Okay, didn't just say other. And that's because of the comfortingness of a candidate who will lie to your face about the perils of climate change, who will lie and say, look, I've drawn with the Sharp. Well, he didn't admit to drawing with the Sharpie, but he did. He drew with a Sharpie on a national weather pronouncement about where the hurricane was due to hit. And he'd misspoken and said Alabama. And like all despots, doesn't want to look weak by admitting a mistake. So he would rather mess with people's lives. He would rather make people unnecessarily fear for their safety and security by telling the people of Alabama, that doubling down to say, no, they're in the path. They're in the trajectory of a hurricane. And they weren't. That was not the prediction, but he altered a map with a Sharpie in order to make that point. Because if people don't know, one of the reasons why there was such widespread starvation in China under communist leader Chairman Mao. I sounded like a cat then saying meow, meow. But under Chairman Mao, he instituted new agricultural practices. He was so against the elite that he redirected a lot of professionals into agricultural work, and he redirected a lot of agricultural workers into steel production workers. And he messed with all of this because, of course, he believed himself to be all wise and all knowing and great at everything, just as Trump continually declares himself to be great at everything and to know more than other people in a host of different fields of knowledge. And Mao instituted the practice of getting agricultural workers to dig deeper trenches when planting vegetables, because tuberous vegetables grow roots. You eat the roots of carrots and potatoes that have extended down into the ground. And he thought, okay, if you dig a deeper trench and you bury these vegetables further down in the ground, the seeds and the initial parts of the potato that you plant, they will have to grow further to reach the surface. And so you'll have more vegetable. It's going to work out great. Everybody's going to have bigger vegetables. This is my genius idea. And guess what happened? The crop planting failed. The vegetables did not grow bigger and stronger to reach the surface. They just didn't make it to the surface. They didn't get a modicum of sunlight filtering through to activate their growth patterns. I don't even know, but I know it does sound kind of like a stupid idea. And guess who couldn't tell that to Chairman Mao? Anybody. Because you tell an all-powerful despot that you think they're wrong and they can have you executed. So everybody told him his plans were going great and he was a genius. And it's been uncovered by historians that people carved vegetables out of wood and had them painted to photograph them. I mean, the photos were still black and white, but you can still tell different tones. To photograph these collections of carved vegetables out of wood, to paint them to say, look at this abundant harvest, because the actual harvest didn't exist. And approximately 30 million people or more starved to death because they couldn't tell a despot he was wrong and that his ideas were bad and should be abandoned. And guess what Trump will do with his bad ideas in a second term? He'll just fire people even faster or have them killed. Who even knows? He definitely tried to have Mike Pence killed for not bending to his will. He tried to use a tool of stochastic terrorism to whip up a crowd of acolytes who hung off his every word as if it was gospel truth and said, Mike Pence has let us down. And if you want to keep this country, you have to fight for it. And those people not only erected a noose outside the Capitol building, but they brought a multitude of different weapons. Not only did they bring hockey sticks and baseball bats to attack police officers, some people brought guns and others brought zip ties in order to be able to imprison members of Congress that they found, and including Mike Pence. They were chanting, hang Mike Pence, and they were also chanting that they wanted to kill Nancy Pelosi. And Republicans are so adept at lying to themselves to say Nancy Pelosi's in charge of security at the Capitol, when the only person with the authority to call the National Guard to the state of Washington, D.C. is not the governor of Washington, D.C., because it's not a state. Our president doesn't have the rights of a state. It can only call on the National Guard from adjacent states, such as Maryland. And they were assembled at the border of Maryland waiting for a call from the commander-in-chief, from Donald Trump. And guess how interested Donald Trump was in calling on the National Guard to help defeat his own supporters, whom he'd whipped up into a frenzy. Not at all. And eventually, Mike Pence stuck in the garage of the Capitol building, stuck in an underground garage to hide from the Trump supporters who were malevolently intent on killing him. He was able to call enough people to say, as the vice president, I'm just insisting that the National Guard come. I'm insisting that people come to help with this violence, to defeat the people attacking police officers. He knew they would be prepared to take his own life. He refused to even get into a Secret Service car because he didn't know if those Secret Service members were prepared to be sufficiently compliant with Trump's wishes that they would take him out or even just drive him away from the building, because their intent was to disrupt the official proceedings of certifying an election win. And it wasn't Trump's election win. So that's why they were intent on disrupting it in order to activate the provision of the Constitution, the 12th Amendment, that says that one delegate from each state shall choose the president if no president have such a majority. If nobody has what constitutes a majority, which in the present day is 270 electoral college votes, then from the persons having the highest numbers, not exceeding 3, on the list for those voted for as president, i.e. whoever's running for president. At that time, I guess they could have more than 2 people. So now we have 2 parties. Actually, no, that's not true, because you've got RFK on some ballots still in some states. But anyway, so on that list, not exceeding 3, the House of Representatives shall choose immediately by ballot the president. And then the Senate would get to choose by ballot the vice president. Although now we have one ticket for the president running mate, so it wouldn't matter. You choose a president and then you've got whoever running mate's attached. But that provision of the Constitution, Donald Trump would have used the legalistic veneer of pretend adherence to, pretend respect for the Constitution, to say the certification was disrupted for good reasons because things were stolen from me. So Mike Pence agreed with me. He said, no, I can't in good conscience certify this election. Trump's raised too many questions. He said he believes. Sure, he's been defeated in 60 court cases that he's tried to bring to say that there's evidence that the votes were stolen from me. And hi, darling. Mommy's doing a broadcast. Do you want to hang out? Okay, so you want to come say hello to my broadcast? All right, and then we'll get off. I was just talking about January the 6th a little bit because, and also some other things. But I will say goodbye now. What do you want to say?
Make sure to vote for Kamala Harris.
Oh, what a nice message. Why is that, Bubba?
Because she's a good representation for our country, and Donald Trump is not.
He's not, yeah. Do we know any reasons about Donald Trump that he's not that great?
He lies a lot. He didn't support the vaccines, and that got a lot of people killed, because if he had supported the vaccines, I'm sure a lot of Trump supporters would have still had their lives.
That's probably true. That's a solid point. I didn't even mention that today. I was talking about other things, but definitely Trump's failure he got vaccinated, but he didn't get vaccinated in public. He didn't draw attention to it, and he didn't endorse it. And COVID pandemic was definitely raging at its peak point whilst he was busy fomenting a plot to stay in office. So my daughter hears me talk. She knows how I think, and
Donald Trump is racist.
Oh, she knows Trump is racist. This is true. I know he's racist for a lot of reasons, including that he and his father settled a case in which they're accused of not renting to people who were black. They used a small C to mark the applications of people of color who applied to rent buildings that they were renting out. And they wanted to stay somewhere, and they're like, can we stay there? And they're like, oh, no, you weren't successful in your application. Sorry. But the truth is, even if you couldn't tell from their application that they were black because they hadn't written I'm black on it, their applications were secretly marked with a C, so that they could be put in the bin and not considered. And that's not cool. That's not a cool way to treat people. And in fact, it's illegal. So that's why Trump and his father had to do a settlement. Anyway, I don't need the internet to think I'm brainwashing my daughter. I just allow her to hear my points of view. And you know what? She knows that I support my points of view with evidence and fact-based reasoning. So to anybody who enjoyed the broadcast, I hope you tune in again another time. I'm going to go hang with my beautiful little girl. She's so awesome and funny and intelligent, and she thinks for herself. And if you thought I was wrong about something, you might tell me, you might not, but I'm sure you would do a good job of believing that you at least had to support your opinion with facts and not just vibes that you felt from memes on the internet. You're a smart little fact finder. Yeah. Take care, everybody. Take care of the women in your life and vote for Kamala Harris. Check your voter registration and encourage others to register to vote if they haven't missed their state deadlines. Participate in phone banking and get out the vote movements if you can. It's really a critical issue if you care about the lives of women in your life, and that includes girls as young as 10. Keep them safe. Protect democracy, protect the people of this country. Thank you. Bye.